Pop Culture Pastor.
All right, here we are. It's time for another episode of Watch Alongs Pop Culture Pastor podcast. My name is Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
Cody's alive.
Barely.
I haven't seen Cody in over a week, and I just told him that I got a little worried when he stopped sending me reels and TikToks and links, because Cody is my kind of link to a younger world that I wouldn't get without him, and I didn't.
Yeah. You were lost.
I felt like I was 80 years old this entire week. I'm like, oh no, am I going to have to get on TikTok?
I'm not on TikTok. I'm just on Facebook Reels where they show TikTok.
Well, yeah, and I equate those as being the same. And I know now every young person's yelling at their phone because I just said that.
Oh, they're so much different.
Also, Danielle's here. Hi, Danielle.
Hey.
Danielle, we figured because this is a show we were watching she actually likes, that maybe she would have something to add.
Yeah.
Unlike The Last of Us.
A lot of times I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I do watch this show, so.
Unlike The Last of Us, which she did not watch with me at all. Why do you not want to watch Last of Us?
Because I don't really care about mushroom monsters.
They're okay.
You missed out on
monsters.
the
Fungus monsters and zombies. I'm so over it.
Well,
yeah, again, the Pascal verse is lost on you.
To each their own, I guess, we'll say, Danielle, because Last of Us was actually quite good.
Yeah, whatever.
Literally, that was all the rage during my clinical intensives.
Really?
Like, everyone knew the show and had either watched it or had plans to watch it post-graduation.
Oh, did you tell them we have a podcast that they could watch along with or listen along with?
I did drop that information.
Yeah. Always selling. We're always selling, Cody.
Yeah.
All right, so we're here to talk about Ted Lasso, Season 3, Episode 5. What was the name of this episode? Did it have a name?
Yeah,
Surely it did.
They always have names. While you're looking for the name, I will say I was in my clinical intensives, and I get a message from Scotty who says, and I quote, "I'm really concerned about Ted this season." And I'm like, I haven't watched this. Don't spoil.
Scotty, I like the Scotty, that's for real.
Oh,
He's no, he's really concerned about Ted Lasso. Like he's a real dude.
I mean, I'm not as concerned as Scotty is about Ted, just because I think that I know where it's going, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I actually think, and this is what I love about Ted Lasso as a show, and we're not even halfway through this season yet. I actually like that. I think that eventually the main people that we're riding along with will all end up in a better place.
Hope so.
Yeah, I actually think that about this show because I think, we'll talk a little bit about it today because I think these episodes are so deep that they're actually exploring something very specific. Last week it was about anger, how they're all dealing with anger, and this week there was something they were dealing with too. And let's just get into it. So this episode's entitled Signs.
Good movie. My wife really would love to talk about it with anyone and everyone. So
I wish it was just an episode about the Ted Lasso characters watching M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, but it is not.
Spoilers.
Has nothing to do with the Mel Gibson M. Night Shyamalan movie. But it does have everything to do with a certain thing going on. But let's give a broad recap here first. Things are going terribly for AFC Richmond, the soccer club. They continue to not win, and that doesn't necessarily mean lose. As I looked at the little board Coach Beard was writing on, they're drawing a lot, which
is a tie.
Yeah, which happens apparently in soccer quite a bit. But they're not winning, and that's important. And that's like the episode kind of starts off with Rebecca walking into the locker room to the coach's office and very angrily like, are we ever going to win again? Because she's breaking up a little bit.
She is projecting, and I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, explain. What do you mean by projecting? Because we're not all therapists.
Well, I mean, she's casting all her frustrations about other things going on in her life, not just the soccer club, onto Ted through a misguided way of it's all about the soccer club, when in fact it's not all about the soccer club with Rebecca.
Right. So in this episode, she kind of continues to go down this road of where I think we're supposed to assume that she can't have children. That she thought maybe she couldn't have children. That's why she blows up at the psychic a few episodes back when the psychic gives her the weird.
I think there'd been reference to that like quite a long time back, that she and Rupert couldn't have children.
Okay.
I think there had been reference to that.
Okay.
I'm not positive.
See,
but.
Danielle being here is paying off already. 'Cause I forget things if they're not from the last episode or two.
Because when he had his new wife or whatever, he made a real pointed remark to her about how they were able to have children. He and his new wife.
So she runs into her ex, the guy she dated for a little while.
Yeah.
Who Roy got mad at her for dating. I think wasn't that the guy Roy got mad at her for dating? Like, why are you dating this guy?
Yeah.
Because you deserve more. And like, yeah, he's got a new fiance. He like even in the conversation drops like this weird, hey, this is the coffee shop you dumped me in, right? like he's weird.
He's very awkward.
I don't come back here longing to see you or anything.
in front of his fiance, who seems oblivious, but does tell a very cringy story about how they accosted Sir Anthony Hopkins.
Yes.
And got mad at him because he wouldn't act out a part on cue.
That is rude of him.
So, like, hold on to that because, you know, obviously Rebecca not in a relationship with that guy anymore. And I do think this episode, there's a string of things going on here about relationships. Go ahead, Cody.
The fiance went to Oxford for a bit.
Yeah.
Which, when you hear more about her, it's like, that's interesting.
It's interesting, especially because she gives the weird shite in nining armor phrase where she mixes up the front of the...
Anybody can fumble over their words.
Yeah, but not like that. Not in the very specific way the psychic said.
It wasn't supposed to be like a point at how idiotic she was, though. It was supposed to be... It was supposed to be a fulfillment of the prophecy.
Right. And so that sends Rebecca on this kind of episode-long arc where she goes to the fertility clinic, to the doctor who cares a lot about Richmond football, as it were.
If Patrick Mahomes came to my office, I might talk a lot about the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is realistic.
To be clear, in order to put it in the better context, if you were like a neurosurgeon and Pat Mahomes was suffering seizures and you still wanted to talk about the Chiefs while he's in this life kind of defining moment, then it would still be the same. And that could probably happen. I could see it.
I could set it off to the side for like an appointment, but as long as he's doing well, like the follow-up appointments, it would be discussed.
Yes. Well,
I liked the rapport she had with the doctor had with her.
It was cute.
It was obvious that they were like friends.
Yeah. I didn't mean it to be a negative. I was just making fun of it.
I liked that rapport.
Anyways, that ends with her getting the news where, while you're not explicitly told, you can tell by the look on her face, how she immediately deflects it into like oh, that's what I figured. That she probably got some bad news. So the psychic thing kind of allowed her to believe, and maybe that's what's been causing the agitation. Is that nervousness that can I allow myself to believe in something I knew couldn't happen? Is that maybe that was it?
Maybe.
She's clearly going through something. And I think the part that fits into this episode may not even be that part, but the part with the ex, the clear addition by subtraction she's experienced by not continuing a relationship with that guy who seems fine, but is not good, not perfect for her, right? Not good, not great.
I thought he was just jolly.
Yeah.
Splendid.
After that, well, let's talk about Keeley, because Keeley has been our loser of the episode for many episodes of this season, and mostly because it seems like her storyline doesn't quite fit into the show. It's almost like we've talked about how it seemed like they just didn't know what to do with her character, but she's a big enough character that they had to do something with her. And this episode, I don't think fixes that situation. In fact, this episode, I think, kind of shines a spotlight on, I don't think they know what to do with her character.
I have the exact opposite view.
You think so?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that it's all been building to this because, like, for the past, the previous episode, I'm like, ooh, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I told Leah that as we're watching the previous week's episode, and then it came to fruition, and I think it's going to create a serious triangle of emotions between her, Roy, and she who shall not be named until we get to that point.
Jack.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I just named her.
Well,
Sorry.
let's talk about it because I'm surprised that's your take. I don't disagree. I just wonder if Jack's not going to get unceremoniously thrown away as a character, and that this was just an aside to put a little more tension. Because at the end of this episode, when Ted's delivering his big speech, Roy clearly has a moment where I think we all understand he's thinking about Keeley. He's thinking about, because Ted actually gives this wonderful speech, which we'll talk about later, that's very much about relationship and who you doing life with. And I don't know. I guess I just don't see it if Jack is just a character to throw in here to put more tension in between Keeley and Roy because there's so many episodes and you can't have them get back together yet.
Well, I also think that it puts more emphasis on her new employment, that she's trying to be a self-made woman, and the struggles that are going with that. And so if that is a storyline that you identify with, that the glass ceiling's sometimes hard to bust through, that maybe for some people Keeley is being fleshed out better than for just your typical audience member that's wanting to relax and hear some Kansasisms from Ted.
Yeah. Now, because I have to ask, because we've talked about this, is this a form of tokenism? Is Jack a woman and that relationship to be what it is? Is it the only reason because of tokenism, or is there some bigger purpose to that relationship? Like, do you think it's tokenism? I guess is what I'm asking. Like, are we just throwing that sort of relationship into this show to satisfy, some sort of checklist?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It seems like a weird time to introduce it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would agree with that. It's weird. I don't know how to take it in yet. I suppose we might learn more after a week or two, but
I think that Keeley has always been presented as someone who just goes with the flow of things.
Yes.
And we've seen that we've seen for several episodes now that she's hurting and that she misses Roy. Mm-hmm. And I think it's normal for party people. I don't want to single out girls, but people that live that kind of a lifestyle to just fill that sadness with whatever comes along that might make them happy in the moment.
Well, okay. So they did make a very concerted effort to show that Rebecca kept calling her when she was with Jack.
Yeah, that's going to become an issue for sure.
And also she shied away from talking at all about Roy in the breakup. Like, she was very hesitant, even though like Jack specifically asked, although Jack thought that she was talking about Jamie or was thinking about Jamie, and it's not Jamie Tart. Do.
It's interesting how she talks about Jamie, because I think maybe the show's trying to like fake you out a little bit, that like, oh, is Jamie going to become a part of this thing too? But I don't think that's it. I think she's just showing genuine admiration for Jamie turning his life around and becoming and progressing as a person.
About time, Jamie.
Yeah. And I didn't see it as she's rekindling some feelings she had for him. I think it's just simply she's showing admiration for a progression and for his progression as a person. I
think she also is probably looking at Jamie and seeing how he's maturing and growing. And I think she's probably got to be questioning, is she doing that herself? Obviously she has this business, but she recognizes that she didn't even know who her boss was. Like, she's not really running this business successfully yet.
She didn't know how to do the commercial advertisement, and that's why Shandy gets hired.
Right.
And
right.
maybe her fling with Jack here is going, like, maybe you're right, and they're working in a direction of she's acting a lot more like an old Jamie Tart would have acted.
I think she's feeling like she's being left in the dust a little bit.
And it's presenting in this, like, I'm just going to have a fling.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so, like, she's going to drink too much and do something maybe she shouldn't with a business partner.
Yeah. Definitely not good business ethics.
No. Let's talk about Zava. So Zava,
he's my favorite.
I've never seen this actor before, I don't think, in anything else. He's amazing.
So Zlatan, who Zava's loosely based off of, he retired from the LA Galaxy, but just like Zava, like he had already accomplished a lot in Europe, and he signs up, and season doesn't go so well, and so he's like, "You're welcome for my presence."
You're welcome.
That's
I will
awesome.
retreat to my avocado farm. Yeah. So Zava gives this speech because they're all down. They're not winning. Even with Zava's still scoring goals, but they're not winning, which kind of goes back to a discussion we had a couple episodes about, like, how, hey, it's not always great to add, even no matter how good someone is in sports, all the time you add someone really good, but it messes up the locker room. And Roy kind of alludes to this at the beginning. He says, it's like we're paying all these players to stand around and watch Zava. And that's the problem when you have someone really good sometimes. When you had a really good team unit where they were all working together, all of a sudden you bring in a guy like Zava and they're all just kind of waiting for him to do something, because he's clearly, they did a good job of showing that he doesn't work well with the team concept.
Well, when you're that good, do you have to be in a team?
And so we get him giving this speech that, of course, annoys Jamie, because Jamie says
Jamie
the same
had just
thing.
said the same thing. Yeah, he just came and said it with more words.
Yeah. Oh, right. And Zava says it very much, in a prettier way,
And with some passion and gusto.
And it actually, there's a part of it, a part of this episode where Zava is like, so like, when we get to the point of this episode where I think the really, like, the main thrust of the episode is, we're going to talk about Zava leaving the team. But, like, I want to point out, I don't think Zava's a terrible person. He's actually kind of admirable, like when he starts talking about his wife.
He's got good family values.
Yeah, it's just that the things that are important to him are the things that are important to him.
Well, and maybe a little bit of ego.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah, he's a narcissist for sure.
All the ego.
He's like, I am an empty vessel filled with gold.
You're welcome.
But he actually says, like, I only look at my wife. The other
They're
guys
talking about what they watch
girls.
on TV or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he says, I don't like moving pictures.
Yes.
Nobody's called him moving pictures since, like, the early 20th century.
He
but
said the only thing I like to watch is my wife.
so, like, I think it's kind of interesting that I don't think he's like a terrible person. But let's get into like the main thrust here. I think the point of this episode, and let me read a little bit of Ted's speech, because Zava leaves, the team's freaking out, the believe sign falls down.
Oh, that video was hilarious.
The believe sign falls down, and Ted gives an amazing speech, and he says this: "You know what I want to mess with? The belief that I matter, regardless of what I do or don't achieve, or the belief that we all deserve to be loved, whether we've been hurt or maybe we've hurt someone else. What about the belief of hope? That's what I want to mess with. Believing things can get better, that I can get better, that we will get better. I think it's really important," he says, "we last. To believe in yourself, to believe in one another. That's fundamental to being alive. If you can do that, if each of you can truly do that, can't nobody rip that apart." That's a little excerpt. I think this episode is about realizing what's good for us, but there's subtraction, and maybe that subtraction is not always bad. And with the remaining characters, I wanna go through that kind of theme. So in that way of thinking, let's talk about Shandy, who has maybe the funniest part of this episode. So Keeley gets in a situation where she has to fire Shandy. I mean, she probably had to fire her an episode or two ago, but
after she hired her, should have fired her.
But Shandy causes her to actually lose an account, which means she's got to get rid of her, and it spawns like Jerry Maguire on steroids, which they're clearly playing around with, as Shandy's giving the famous "Who's coming with me?" And but it even goes farther, because like there's an element of this like subtracting something from your relationships, but there's an episode of like there's an element of rejection to it too, like how everybody's dealing with rejection, and Shandy does not deal well. In fact, she's angry almost immediately. We hear her yelling, she's cursing a lot, she's mad, and then like when she realizes nobody's going to go with her, that desperation kicks in, and she's like, "Please let me stay." She starts begging, and then she gets mad again. And so I think, I think there's this thing they're playing around with this by subtracting what's good in our relationships, not good. Because I think, on some level, as we saw with Ted and his wife, it might have actually been better for them to not be together. What do you think about that? Am I just seeing what I want to see?
I maybe. So for me, this episode had two things going on. The mental health of everyone.
Yeah.
And then for parts, I think if you view the past like 2 or 3 episodes as a storyline arc, it harkens back to Ecclesiastes that the wicked will prosper at times. Mm-hmm. And those that are righteous or do what's good will suffer. Everything happens under the sun. Nothing's new. But be happy with where you're at in life. Yeah. And so within this episode, there definitely was, especially with Ted. So like, he might not have had a ton of screen time this episode, but I think his storyline was the most important. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say that he's been going through CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, but something he said fits that modality really well, as he's about to have a panic attack after getting off the phone with his son. He's like, he's safe. He's not at harm. He's not.
He's okay.
He's okay. And so replacing those illogical or misguided thoughts changes our behavior and our actions. And so if you can cognitively think about it and realize that it's not as bad as your perception is, then you can work through it and get it to where it is appropriate, the level of reaction or interaction you have.
And look what he's able to do right after that. He's able to go out to the team who are freaking out and deliver this speech and lead them to a place where, like, hey, we've got what we need in this room. We've got us. It was always about us. And maybe the reason they get sidetracked is because it became about Zava.
And which him and Jamie both said, like, question if they needed Zava.
Yes. Jamie was right the whole time. We don't need him, coach. Jamie. Yeah. And I think I think you're right. Of course, the show is Ted Lasso. And so we're kind of on the journey with him. And he's going to inform a lot of the other stuff that's going on. And part of the episode, as I said, I think is about like the separating of or dealing with rejection, especially when it was being rejected by things maybe you're finding out you didn't need. So let's talk about Nate.
Nate the Great.
Because Nate has a really intriguing episode. So
the Wonder Kid.
Yeah, he's.
I thought it was Wonderkind.
we saw in the last episode some interesting things with Nate and Rupert, where he gets glances of Rupert's character. Remember, he sees him with the assistant, his hand on her back, and he gives a look. And I think it's fair to point out that Nate has made tons of progress in the way he acts. Like, he couldn't even talk to Rebecca in season 1, episode 1 or 2, when he went up to her office. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Now he's in a place where he sees Rupert doing things, and you can tell he disapproves. But he's not continually, like he used to, like, really backtrack a lot and be like, oh, sorry. He said sorry a lot. And in this episode, you see Nate.
He actually talked to his secretary.
Right. And this is the crazy part. He goes out on the date with
the model
Anastasia, who is like the epitome of everything Nate thought he wanted. So if we go back to last season, this all stems from Nate and Ted. Because if you remember what Nate said to Ted, his whole reason for being angry was that Ted made him feel seen. But then as Nate kind of progressed and grew, Ted kind of was also going through his own stuff as his stuff became more elevated. But as Nate got better, it points out maybe a fault with Ted. Ted sees the people that really need to be seen, which is great. But then when they're like equals, maybe Ted doesn't see them as much. Ted's drawn to the low, to the very low, right? Because is Ted there emotionally for Coach Beard, who is probably his best friend?
That's really interesting because, like, I know people like that. Like,
I would say
yeah.
a lot of pastors are like that.
That's
Yes.
what I am.
Like,
okay.
yeah.
That's what I immediately
Yeah.
thought of, because
Yeah.
I'm like, as pastors, can we fall into this trap? It seems like it would be really easy to gravitate toward the people that need us the most. But then if you remember what Nate said to him, he said he felt abandoned. And it was because Nate actually progressed. He was progressing.
Yeah.
And so I only bring that up to say, if you look at Nate in this episode, he's there. He's arrived. He's like so much better than he was in season 1. The self-doubt, all of that is gone. And now he's starting to figure out all of the stuff he reached for because he felt abandoned
Wasn't right.
is not the thing. And something really important happens this episode. He's on a date with this supermodel who totally, she's super immature, super narcissistic, super selfish,
Super hilarious.
It was all hilarious. And she just leaves him and he doesn't bat an eye.
You are like glossing over the big thing. He got his table finally.
He got his table.
And he got the girl, and it made me so mad. Like the hostess girl. like I'm feeling like Jonah when it comes to Nate. Like I know he's going to be redeemed, and it makes me mad because I'm angry with him.
But you don't see the progress he had?
I do see the progress, but I'm still mad at him.
Like, he immediately, like, it doesn't faze him that she left. He's just like, okay, that was probably for the best. In fact, he sticks up for himself. Did you notice that? Uh-huh. Again, season 1 Nate isn't standing up for himself. This Nate, when the girl's bagging on the restaurant, he's like, well, this restaurant's really important to my family. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, he's getting the theme of the episode, which I think is relationships. He's telling her, like yeah, if you're on a date with someone, it's important to him, so it's got to be important to you if this is going to work as a relationship. Danielle humors me and eats things, watches things, goes to see movies that she doesn't care about because she knows I like them. And that's how relationships work. And Nate stands up for himself and says, hey, this restaurant's important to me. And she bolts.
When you don't have the same values, it makes relationship difficult. And I love the fact that when he's talking to the hostess after she leaves, he compares himself to his grand. Yeah. In the way that he describes things. And I mean, he highlights the family values and that a lot of his family memories, the good ones, are at this restaurant. And that this was always an area that he wanted to be at because that's where all the important, happy people were.
And notice they focus on Nate's good family memories. There's a little aside where he calls up. You think he's calling the model to ask her out on a date, and he's going through like, "Hey, I was just wondering, like this," and it turns out to be his mom. And you're seeing like, oh, okay, so yeah, Nate didn't have it all bad. Clearly, his dad messed him up. He's working through that, but we're seeing the good relationship parts of Nate and the things I think that are leading him back. Now, brings up an interesting point because I do think Ted owes him an apology.
I don't.
You don't think so?
No.
You think Ted owes him an apology?
I do think.
Why?
Not
just for...
Because we do things to people not intentionally. Ted would never intentionally hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. But he does do... he did do that. He did, in a sense, abandon Nate because the reason Nate pulled himself out of that was because of Ted's attention. And he wasn't ready to be dropped.
It takes two to tango. So you have to cross that bridge yourself.
And Nate's going to apologize. We've already seen he wants to. And Rupert shows up at just the right time, like the Satan he is.
He's like Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate.
Yeah, that's what I said last week. I said that exact word.
Did you?
Yep.
He did.
He's throwing supermodels at him. Yeah. Yeah, he's the devil in this thing. And I just think it's really cool. That was the combo, the thing I connected with in this episode was, hey, they're exploring what real relationships about. What real care for someone's about. Like not superficial care. Because Ted's jokiness and stuff and kindness and like it's cool to make someone feel seen. But if what they're needing is real relationship and they don't get that, no, even it's not Ted's fault, but we hurt people when we don't mean to all the time. It's a very human thing. And so I see all these elements. Here's what I'm going to say. Man, I love this show. They are on the surface, it's such a silly show about a Kansas bumpkin who goes to England to coach soccer, which he didn't know anything about. And it's silly. But it's incredible. It has incredible depth.
Within this episode, I enjoyed the fact that you do see relationship between Roy, Coach Beard, and Ted when Ted finds out that his son is in a bullying incident, which I knew immediately that the kid was being the bully.
Because you work with kids.
And
he's gone through a traumatic experience of his parents separating. So, yeah, you knew that.
This is what we in the business like to call an adverse childhood experience.
I'm going to need you to refer to it as we in the biz.
Yes. Like there was several key things that happened during the Zoom with Ted's son. He brought up that if I would have listened to you, Dad, and count to 10 and count again, I wouldn't have done what I done. And you learned that was what Ted's dad had taught him. Mm-hmm. And there is still some hurt, some grief from Ted's dad's passing that Ted still hasn't processed fully through yet.
But also look at what that's teaching him too. There's repression in that. Mm-hmm. And as we saw in the last episode, that maybe repressing the anger over a long period of time is not good.
So as someone that teaches coping skills, I will say that I think that counting back from 10 or counting to 10 or deep breathing, whatever it is you do, like if it gives you enough perspective that like, oh, this really isn't anything and you can let it go, then that's a good thing. But if you just hold it in and let it build and simmer, that's not good. Jesus talks about don't let the sun go down on your anger.
And how do you get rid of your anger?
And so those sorts of things.
I believe we ended the last episode on it with Ted telling Michelle that he was not happy. He was angry about the therapist.
You go to the
who was probably crossing some ethical boundaries. He deserves to be upset.
So many ethical boundaries being crossed in this show. Between Rupert, Shandy,
Keely and Jack,
and the therapist.
Yeah. So I'm still on board the Nate redemption train. I think he made a lot of progress this week. I'm very pleased. Very pleased with Nate's episode this week. Who do you think the winner of the episode is, you guys?
Oh, before we get to that.
Okay, yeah, you want to talk about something else? Did I miss something?
There was some foreshadowing, and I loved it.
Okay, tell me.
That Leslie was afraid to even say it out loud.
Yep. Yeah.
What do you think about changing managers?
I love that in that moment, Leslie is torn between the love of his friend and that he's doing his job well. He's saying, like, look, the problem's not the talent on the field. And if we eliminate that being the problem, then the problem has to be the coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're right. We should mention that. That was a piece of foreshadowing to hold on to. I don't think they're going to have to fire him. I think Ted leaves of his own volition.
Hope so, or it'll get ugly.
At the end of this episode, there was another thing I thought was important to point out in Ted's speech when he says he's done with shame. And what else does he say? Shame.
I did not read the speech to the listeners.
I can't. Well, I didn't read that part. It was longer than that. But he says, I'm done with all that. And he says a curse word.
He did.
That is very important because I don't believe Ted has ever cursed on this show before.
It was poopy talk, and I was not.
But I think it's meant to tell you that this is a moment of serious gravitas for Ted. That he's talking to his team, but he's also talking to himself, and he's turning a corner.
Real talk.
Yeah, and I thought that was a big deal. All right, who's the winner of the episode?
I'll go Ted.
Ted, yeah. Danielle, who's the winner of the episode? Who gets the most to do with?
I guess I'll go with Ted too.
Ted. I'm gonna go with Nate. I think Nate, the restaurant stuff being a focal point of the episode, I think Nate turned a corner. Although I wouldn't disagree with Ted. Ted and Nate were clearly the focal points, even though they weren't like maybe the ones who get the most screen time. Although Nate
Rebecca gets a ton of screen time.
Rebecca gets a ton of screen time. I still don't know where they're going with that. But let's move on to the loser. Who's the loser of the week?
So I noticed something that in myself, and I'll make the losers of the week the announcers. because they're hilarious.
Yeah.
And they just get overlooked each time we do a recap. And I love the
hilarious.
announcers.
Yeah, they were funny. They are funny. We're the losers for not noticing them.
Exactly.
Who's the loser of the week in this episode? Whose storyline do you not like?
I don't know. Okay, I was gonna say, I guess I don't know what we're basing this on.
Well, it's a character that's not getting, a good part of the storyline, or if it doesn't make sense.
I feel like Keely's the loser.
Yeah.
I feel like they're just making a mess out of her. I mean, she is
Yeah.
a mess, but like, good grief. A
Yeah.
person would eventually make good decisions.
Well, she had been making good decisions.
Kinda.
And I wonder, like, again.
Kinda, but again, I think it's just it's all showing her immaturity and how unprepared she is for, like, even the Shandy thing. Like, she hires her because she feels sorry for her friend.
Yeah.
That's why she hired her, not because of her talent or skill. Babs knew that.
Babs was correct.
Babs knew that.
Serious question. What is in her drawers?
That was funny the way you worded
assistant's
that.
drawer that she's so nervous about. No, a serious question.
Her office, her desk drawer.
Her desk drawer. Do we think Keely ends up with her business by the end of this season?
No, she's gone.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to result in an explosion, but she's going to find that it wasn't that important. I think she's in a similar way, maybe doing the same thing Nate did. She's basing her worth on whether she could do something, and really she didn't need that.
Well, and what's crazy to me is she was doing something. She just wanted it to be bigger.
Yeah.
Like, she was doing something, and she
that's
was
true.
She was
when she was
successful.
just a part of the team.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say that being in classes right now, and one of my classes is about management, and one of the chapters focused heavily upon what people can do, should do, and those that can be promoted and those that they might be operating at their max capacity, even though you think that they would make a great leader in a higher role. Mm-hmm. And so Keely might be just one of those people that, like, she's great at the advertising, marketing stuff, but maybe it's on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just with the local football club.
Well, see, and I think Jack knows that. I think Jack is a smart business person, probably. And I think Jack knows that, and that's why she said, let's keep it small. But I have a feeling that Jack's going to end up having to be like, I can't financially support this anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly do feel like Jack was preparing Keely to be fired with her sandwich firing example.
Yeah, with her teaching her how to fire Shandy. Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
I'm gonna move away from Keely as loser of the episode. I think I've made her loser of the episode the last couple times. I don't know. I'm torn on the direction they go. I'm torn because I'm worried that it's just something to lengthen out her storyline, to put more distance between her and Roy before she goes back to Roy.
Can I call you Natalie and Bruglia? Because you are
I'm
torn.
It's a deep cut, but I'll allow it. I'm actually going to go with Rebecca.
Oh, really?
Rebecca.
I like Rebecca's
So
story.
Rebecca has been
Bex?
given. She's been
Not
given.
Bex.
Not that Rebecca. Rebecca, the owner of the team. She's been given tons of screen time. Her story has in these first 5 episodes. 6. I don't know. Whatever number this is. 5 episodes. And I don't see it pulling together like the other storylines. Hers and Keely's storylines, I'm kind of struggling with. Even Roy could be up there too, because Roy gives a very funny speech about what to do with bullies.
That was maybe my favorite scene in Ted Lasso thus far.
Yeah,
But
Roy
it's
hasn't
kind of a
gotten lot
caricature.
and he hasn't gotten a lot of screen time, really.
Yeah, Roy's kind of getting the short shrift.
Well, Roy's getting the Coach Beard treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That he's there for a few funny, awkward
Little
moments.
comic relief.
And
Yeah.
then Oh, we'll move on to the other characters.
So I will say, saying the loser of the show, Keely in the last couple, Rebecca this one, it's not on the actress, the actors or whatever. I actually think this is a problem because the show is so deep and they have so many characters that are interesting. You know what? I'm going to change it. At least they're going deep with Rebecca. New loser, Danny Rojas.
I was going to say the whole team.
Danny Rojas
started
is
off
hilarious, but like so thin and shallow this season. Like he's a cartoon.
Yeah, I agree.
And he wasn't a cartoon last year. He had a little more depth. But yeah, I'm gonna switch it over. It's Danny Rojas.
Thanks a lot, Zava.
How many mustaches out of 10?
I'm back up to 8.
8? Danielle, how many mustaches out of 10?
I'll go 7 on this one.
I'm also going to give it a 7. And I think it's interesting about this show that I don't necessarily, even though I think I would give them credit for doing deep things with their story, it doesn't always result in great television.
I loved this episode. This episode was hitting home with Cody.
Yeah. I laughed, but I had to watch it twice to really get the deep stuff because after my first watching, I was like, not the best episode. But they're all good. I mean, they're all good. Ted Lasso's good show.
So I watched this on Saturday, and after being in a week of therapeutic skills, like that portion definitely stood out just because, like, oh, this is what I've been surrounded by, and oh, they are putting a lot of emphasis on this in this episode, especially around Ted, and so seeing that. Really hit home.
Side question to build off that. Has there ever been another show more cathartic than Ted Lasso for the viewer? To watch people go through like very real struggles and yet still be as positive as it is very cathartic.
Unless it takes a really dark turn, which it could.
No, don't do that to me, Cody. I can't handle it. I don't need Ted Lasso to take a dark turn. Everything's uphill from here. The team's going to get back on track. Nate's redemption arc's going to continue. Ted's going to find out what really means the world to him.
Am I the only one that hopes that Ted and Rebecca end up together?
Oh,
I said that.
I think it's a possibility for sure.
See, and that's what I was thinking. Like the psychic said that she would have a family. Well, Ted has a kid.
But then I'm gonna feel bad about Sassy. I'm gonna feel bad for Sassy because Sassy's playing. She's a therapist, but I think she's playing games too that she thinks she doesn't need a relationship as much as she thinks.
I don't really like
does.
her though. I don't think she's very nice.
Like this season, she's kind of been useless.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then we're back to the Danny Rojas problem.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't subscribed already, you know the deal. Subscribe to the pod. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Join the community group on Facebook. Blah blah blah. All that stuff. And give us a review on wherever you listen to us. This podcast. Give us a good review and contact us. Let us know you're listening. We love that sort of thing.
Please.
We'll see you next time.